Hi everybody, thanks for joining me again. I have wanted to do a video on the royal family for a number of weeks, even before I'd heard about the interview that Oprah landed with Meghan and Harry, and so this just really presented the perfect opportunity. And this video is a part of a longer series that I'm putting together on the royal family, and so you can think of this as basically a kind of an appetizer for some of the other videos. And I'll talk about that later. But I just want to get right to my points here. So I was trying to think of how to approach this video, and it occurred to me that maybe the best or most interesting thing would be to think about 10 questions that I think really get to the root of what people are interested in regarding the royal family and Meghan Markle. So this is not going to be anywhere near an exhaustive, complete analysis of the royal family or history of the royal family. I am working on something more substantial, like I said, but I think this will really interest you. And I want to say that I've not seen the interview yet with Meghan and Harry because it hasn't aired yet. And so I know I will have some thoughts afterward. But anyway, whether you've seen the interview or haven't seen the interview, I think you'll find this interesting. So I came up with 10 questions that I think are really in everyone's mind. I tried to like I said, boil all this down into what I think are 10 pertinent questions. All right, and I just want to list the questions off for you first, and then I'm going to go back and answer or discuss each one. All right, so one question: is the royal family or is the institution of British monarchy toxic? Because one of the things that that I've been reading about is that, and I don't think it's any secret, is that Meghan really thinks that the royal family and the institution of the British monarchy is toxic and unhealthy, and I think that Harry, it seems like, has come to agree with her. So that's one question, okay? And to answer that question, we are going to have to get back into some history. And so we are going to talk about Princess Diana some today, and like I said, just barely scratching the surface, but I do have more up ahead. It's question number 2. And I don't want to offend anybody with this question, okay, because I know that asking the question for Meghan Markle fans could be offensive in and of itself, okay? But here's the question. People ask it. I see it all the time. Is Meghan Markle a narcissist? So we're going to talk a little bit about what is a narcissist. I'm sure a lot of you know. And based on, and this is purely my personal opinion, but based on what I've read and seen, do I think that that's plausible? I'm not diagnosing anyone formally here or anything like that, okay? And I'm not saying that you have to agree with what I say, or I don't, I think you understand. And if you don't understand, nothing I say is going to help you understand, right? Question number 3, are Harry and Meghan behaving reasonably? In other words, do they have just cause for feeling aggrieved, for feeling like the royal family and also the media have mistreated them? All right. Number 4, was Diana abused by Charles or the family? And of course, I'm not talking about physical abuse. I'm not even raising that, okay? Nobody at all has claimed that. But, she herself said that basically that she felt persecuted by the family. She felt mistreated and by Charles. And so, I want to look at that. Number 5, what of this week's bullying claims that have come out again about Meghan Markle? And so there was an email, we'll talk about this, there was an email that was leaked to the Times, and apparently this guy this staffer or assistant who used to work for Meghan and Harry, after Meghan joined the family, this person was worried that Meghan was bullying a number of people, and so this is an email from the past that leaked to the Times this week. We'll talk about that. Number 6, has the response to Meghan Markle been racist? This is something that I know a number of you believe. I totally understand it. I'm going to try to take it seriously and look at it and talk about it a bit. Number 7, do people have legitimate reasons to dislike Meghan Markle? Okay, and I know that there are a number of people who are ticked off at Harry too. I don't want to do this cliched thing where we assume that Meghan is calling all the shots. I think that's definitely a step too far. And so, I'm not, when I say, is it reasonable to have an issue with Meghan Markle? You could also say the same thing about Harry, but I'm focusing on her just because that is what the media does. It seems to be doing. Number 8. Is there something wrong with Harry and Meghan striking out on their own, or the manner in which they have done it? And so the question is, was there something unreasonable or inappropriate or improper about the way that they've conducted themselves in the last, couple of years as they exit the royal family? Okay, so we'll look at that question. Number 9. Who was at fault for the failure of Charles and Diana's marriage? Or maybe another way of thinking about it is number 10. Was Diana an innocent party in the marriage? Was the fault mostly with Charles? Diana definitely presented herself in some of the interviews that she did as she called it, quote, a lamb to the slaughter. Meaning that she was extremely, obviously we know she was young, but extremely innocent and naive and just had nothing but the best of intentions and was completely honest and truthful and that sort of thing. Based on what I've read, what is my assessment of that and of why the marriage failed? Was it as simple as the fact that Charles loved Camilla and had an affair? And was that something that Diana had no responsibility, or was the failure of the marriage something that Diana really didn't have much responsibility for? So we're going to look at that. So that's 10 questions right there. And obviously, I'm not going to be exhaustive, like I said, in the way that I answer them. There's going to be a ton of things that I have to leave out. There's going to be, and I'm sure I'm going to make a couple of mistakes here and there because I am mostly going from memory. And usually in my videos, I'll make a couple of mistakes every video and then I correct them in the next video. Okay, so anyway. Let's jump right into it. So number 1, is the royal family and or the institution of British monarchy toxic? Well, that is a complicated question. And, if you'll bear with me, I need to explain just a bit about the history of the monarchy and the history of Queen Elizabeth's family and her upbringing, and things have changed in a lot of ways. So, hundreds of years ago, the monarchy in Britain, or what was England at the time, it had absolute power. So if the king or the queen said, off with their head, it was off with their head. If they said, I want to invade this country because I want to, then it was done. If the king said, I want to break with the Catholic Church and basically start a new religion, and I'll be at the head of the religion, and I'm doing that because I want to screw this woman that I have the hots for, then, I'm talking about Henry VIII, then it happened. But what happened over the last several hundred years is that the power of the monarchy was forcibly reduced, and they were forced to share power with Parliament. And this is just a general democratizing force that that gained power over the last several hundred years. And so the idea was, society needs to be, the government needs to be more democratic and less autocratic. So power not in the hands of one, but more dispersed among elected representatives. And so even though in the time of Queen Victoria in the late 19th century, she still had a lot more power and significant power. But this power was reduced, and so when Queen Elizabeth II, the current queen, when she became queen, the power of the monarchy had basically been reduced to more or less being a kind of a figurehead and a representative of the country and representative of the state. But there are other things that are significant that come along with it. For instance, a number of you probably know that the Queen has weekly meetings with the Prime Minister. And so that would be like having, weekly meetings with our president here in the U.S. And so, now that is a complicated question. And without, spending time unpacking exactly what toxic means, I'll just assume that, we all understand what toxic means more or less, okay? Um, Here's the thing is that you have to remember that the royal family, and maybe this seems obvious and goes without saying, but they are not a normal family, and they're not they do not exist under normal conditions. Think about your family right now. It can be your family if you have children with your husband or wife, or you can think about like your parents and that family unit or whatever. But think about your family for a minute. Now imagine that suddenly your family was told that it was going to be basically the representative of an entire country. What I'm saying is that suddenly you and your family would become basically the figureheads for your country, and that from now on you would spend your time going around and doing charity events and going around and giving speeches, and basically your life would become in public. And not only would it be public, we're not just talking about normal celebrity here or movie stars, but you are supposed to represent your country in a deeper way, because you are, for instance, the head of the church. Queen Elizabeth II, she's still the head of the Anglican Church. And you are also the last vestiges, the remaining few of a dynastic system that goes back hundreds of years. All right? And goes back to kings and queens who we read about in the history books even to this day, and who had absolute power because they were assumed to have the divine right of kings, the divine right of queens. And yes, over time their power was reduced and they had to share it with Parliament, until now what your family is basically just the symbolic aspect. You don't have a lot of real power, but you have tremendous, depending on who you ask, you have tremendous symbolic power. Okay? Now, what am I trying to say with all that? Imagine your family, take that at your family, but then put it in that context. And what you're going to find is, of course, that context has a distorting effect in a number of ways. And here's the other thing, and it makes things a lot more serious. Okay? And so, any family has its issues. And I think that we could argue that, most families have some toxic elements. How many families are really actually toxic? I don't know. But my point being that to ask a question, which I know that I raised it, but to ask a question, is the royal family toxic? Well, it seems to me, after reading a lot, it seems to me that it is definitely what we would consider to be abnormal, unnatural. It is a very serious life. It is a life where everything is pre-planned. And I'm talking here now about, not about the main royals especially, but people like Meghan and Harry, they fall under this. Everything hyper scheduled. And also, as we know, the royal family is not supposed to be political. They are supposed to be apolitical. Why are they supposed to be apolitical? Because one of the whole points of maintaining the monarchy, even after the power was basically given to the Parliament, one of the main points of maintaining the monarchy was so that there would always be a stable, symbolic head of state, no matter which way the political winds blew. All right? And we don't have that over here, right? Our president is also the head of state. And so you have those two things, real power and symbolism put together. But in Britain, it's split. So here's my point, is that, of course, that's going to make things more serious, and it's going to make things much more circumscribed and much more restrictive. And also, it does seem to me, reading about the Windsor family going back to, and I read about them going back to the 19th century, it does seem to me that the children were successively raised, not successfully, but successively raised with what we would consider to be a cold and very, very cold upbringing. Not what you would think of, generally speaking, as a warm upbringing. The queen, because Queen Elizabeth became queen when she was so young, she became queen when she was 25, and 25 is considered to be really young when we're talking about a monarch. But she became queen when she was 25, and so she had not had time to be a young mother or a wife for very long. In fact, one of the things that she's been quoted as saying, as confiding to people, is that the happiest time of her life was that period between when she got married, when she married Philip, and when her father died and she had to assume the responsibility of queen. That she had this beautiful period where she was like a semi-normal person, okay? But then when she became queen, there was all this responsibility that was put on her. Now, you might be saying to me, wait a minute, I thought you just said that there's really no real power that the monarch has. And now you're telling me, well, she's not just a celebrity. They have all these responsibilities on them. Yeah, it's kind of both. But they do have a lot of symbolic power, okay? And what I mean by that is that they're public figures. They get attention when they give speeches, when they go places, the kind of philanthropy that they prioritize, the kinds of issues that they prioritize in their speaking engagements and stuff. And then also, don't forget that the Queen has a regular weekly meeting, a regular weekly audience with the Prime Minister. And so imagine, in a way, that confers a tremendous amount of power on someone in a way, because they are guaranteed to have the ear of the most powerful person in the country every week. And that's really tremendous. And of course, the Prime Ministers always respect the Queen. She's been around so long. She's seen so much that they haven't seen. And so they really do take her, from what I've read, they often take her advice to heart when she has advice. And, so my point being, and there's other things too, you can look it up yourself, but there's other ways in which the royal family, they still have duties and roles and privileges and power that might surprise you. But anyway, so my point being that I think that when Elizabeth II, when she ascended to the throne, her father died suddenly. Remember that. And I know a number of you know this, especially my British readers. But George VI, the father of Queen Elizabeth, he died in his 50s. And he had been sick, but it was unexpected that he died. And she was not expecting. Elizabeth II was making plans for her family to continue to enjoy their semi-normal lives. And she was not expecting this. And so she had to rush home, become queen. And my point earlier was that even though the job of queen, it is largely symbolic power, there is a shitload of work still that has to be done. And she has these famous, they're called red boxes. And this red box, it contains all of these reports that she gets regularly from the government, different sectors of the government and so forth. And she's expected to read these reports and to make comments on them and to bring up issues if there are any issues. So it's almost like, it's having a really important, another set of eyes to keep an eye on everything that's going on in the government. And she gets top secret classified information and stuff like that, okay? And it's a lot, it's a lot of reading, apparently. And my point being, okay, finally, to get to it, I know a number of you think that I meander, but that's the point of this video. My point being that it really made her, in a number of ways, it made Queen Elizabeth II a very hands-off parent. And because, look, no matter how much you love your children, if you feel that in some significant ways, the weight of an entire country, and not just an entire country, but the weight of your ancestors, all the kings and the queens before you, who now are looking to you, so to speak, to keep the ball rolling and to do it honorably and stuff. I mean, there's a tremendous amount, not just of a sense of public duty and responsibility, but a tremendous sense also of not wanting to up things because you don't want to screw things up that your ancestors have sacrificed so much for, to keep the family in power and to keep this institution of the monarchy alive. So Elizabeth II was not your normal mother. Philip was not your normal father. And of course, we know that, even in normal families, there's a lot of crap. Okay, there can be a lot of toxic stuff. So I don't think that based on what I've read, I do not think that the royal family was abusive, or that Charles' parents were abusive, or that Charles himself was abusive to Diana. And I don't think that the family is abusive to Meghan Markle or Harry. Now, that's not to say that Meghan Markle or Harry might not have some legitimate gripes, and I'm going to get to that in a moment. But I don't think that they're abusive. What I do think we have when we look at the royal family is I think we have a succession of cold parents and cold grandparents and people who were in a number of ways quite detached from their children and left a lot of the upbringing to nannies and were out of town a lot and away a lot. So I think that yes, it's not unfair to say that there are a number of significant unhealthy dynamics that exist in royal families and in the Windsor family. But do I think toxic? I would not. I think that is not the right use of that term. No. Do I think abusive? Certainly not. So again, I told you I'm going to answer things in a nuanced way as I see them, and I can't give you a yes or no answer. No, I don't think they're toxic. But that is not to say that everything is all peachy and wonderful, or that there are not things that are very difficult to deal with. I read that Charles, when he was growing up, and the others, when those kids were growing up, especially when they got to, well, basically the whole time, if they wanted to see their parents, they had to make an appointment, particularly the Queen. And so, Prince Andrew, for instance, very famously, someone who was at the palace when he was growing up, said that, for instance, Andrew would go around and would say, is the Queen available? And can I basically, can I see my mom? And oftentimes the children were told that they couldn't because she had all this other stuff going on. She loved her kids. She loves her kids. I really believe that from what I've read. But you have to understand, too, that she was raised in a different way. Look, we're talking about aristocratic British culture in the early to mid 20th century, and even a bit beyond that. And they, the upper class, the aristocracy, they would basically all send their kids away to boarding school as soon as possible. And so it was just understood. And if you read Lady Anne Glenconner's book, she talks about this. So Anne, and I'm going to get into this in a later video, but Anne Glenconner is a very famous member of the British aristocracy. She was basically Princess Margaret's, the Queen's sister. She was Princess Margaret's best friend and had this really colorful, interesting life that I'll talk about later, but in another video. But she wrote a book recently, and one of the things that she talked about is how messed up her children were by the British aristocratic way of raising children and sending them to boarding school. And she says that looking back on it, she's astounded that that is how everybody around her was raising their kids, but it just seemed normal. If everybody else is doing it, it just seemed natural. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, yes, there were unhealthy things about the Windsor family, but you also have to understand that in their particular, and I'm not making excuses, but in their particular context, cultural context and social context and all of this, that distant, disconnected, kind of cold style parenting was not an abnormal thing. All right. Okay, let me move on to the second one. Is Meghan Markle a narcissist? I'm regretting I even put that on there. How can I unpack what someone is or isn't in 5 minutes? But damned if I'm not going to try. No. All right. So I'm just going to come out and say, no, I don't know. I don't know if she is or not. And I don't think that I would ever claim absolutely to know that anyway. But I really don't. Maybe I'm going to have a different impression after I watch this video. But what I can tell you is I don't know that she's a narcissist. I think that there are narcissistic aspects to the way that she and Harry have some of the things that they say and some of the ways in which they conduct themselves. But, I don't know. She is very, you watch a video with her This is not, I mean, this is someone who is clearly very impressive. In fact, one of the palace aides years ago, when she first came on the scene, was quoted as telling another that her IQ was probably bigger than all of theirs combined, all of the people in that room. I know those of you who dislike Meghan Markle really hate to hear that, but look, I mean, I watch videos with her, and she's very slick. She's very, very polished. You know, I wish I could be that polished. I look at her and I'm like, damn. But as we know, that in and of itself is very common in narcissists. And I'm not saying that she's a narcissist because she's very slick, but I am saying that there are some things that I've read about her that indicate that she might have a propensity for basically ditching friends and ditching people when they're not useful to her anymore. You know, that is one of the common allegations that's come up in a number of the articles that I've read over the years, and some of the reading that I've done in general. I don't know. I don't know how true these things are. And so I guess I'm going to leave this question kind of an open question, and then I'm going to come back to it after I have not finished reading Finding Freedom yet. I'm wanting to finish that. I'm only about really a fourth of the way through it. I'm wanting to hurry and finish that. And I read quickly. I skim it, right? But I wanted to finish that to finish getting her perspective, because we do know, and what's come out in court recently is that she and Harry did contribute to it, or they talked to people who then contributed to it, right? And so it is their perspective by and large. So I want to read more of that, okay? And I want to look at this interview tonight. But all I will say about the narcissistic thing is that she's very, very slick. And when I watch her, I'm just not sure if there's real warmth there, or if what I'm seeing is an act. And of course, you never totally know that, but she is very slick. And also, I would say, and I'll get into this in a moment, but I do find some of the complaints that she and Harry have raised to be really self-centered and short-sighted and unduly aggrieved. And so we'll see. We'll get to that. Back to that. Number 3, are Harry and Meghan behaving reasonably? Do they have a cause for feeling aggrieved? All right, I think that there's something really important that we should say about Harry before we even get Meghan into this, all right? And I'm getting all like positioned in my chair here. I'm about to like launch into it. No, this is part that I find really interesting in particular. So one of the books that I've looked at, and you have to take all of these books with a grain of salt. You know, here's a little aside. How do I believe that you should do research or learn about a topic? Well, you certainly can't take what the media says at face value. I'm not saying they're always wrong. Okay, I'm just saying like you have to at times always have a critical eye. And also, I don't take any one source or any one book that I read as truth. I take them all as different perspectives. And I think I've mentioned before this movie, Rashomon, and it's an old classic movie, but the idea with Rashomon is that there's one event that occurs, and then you have all of these different witnesses, and they see things differently, or they notice different parts, have different impressions of the story, and then you try to like piece all that together, right, and come up with something that's maybe correct. And so the things that I have been saying, and I'm going to say in this video and in my next videos, I'm basically taking what I get from a number of books that people have written that I've read parts of, or I've read synopsis of, or in some cases I've read the whole book. One source in particular, it's called The Diana Chronicles by Tina Brown, who was the editor of Vanity Fair for a while. And what I like about her book about Diana is that, first of all, it was written well after the fact, after Diana died. And there were a number of people that went on the record, friends of hers, people close to her. Okay, so it's not like it's just her enemies or just the palace talking, right? It's even her best friends at times. And also in that book, The Diana Chronicles, the writer Tina Brown, she cites different books that she's read. So, Diana's butler, Paul Burrell, he wrote a book. And so she talks about that. Prince Charles wrote a book. Diana, as we know, she talked to Andrew Morton and basically wrote her own book about her experience. So not taking any one of these at face value, but putting them all together. And I think that Tina Brown does a good job in the Diana Chronicles, for example, of doing that. So that's my approach, all right? I can't offer you absolute truth. All I can offer you is my best guess or my personal opinion based on the different stuff that I've read and trying to be balanced. So question, are they behaving reasonably? Do they have cause for feeling aggrieved? So here's what I wanted to talk about. I want you to imagine what Harry's position in the family has been like, even if they have treated him wonderfully. Because I think that my personal opinion, based on what I've read, is that Harry has been treated well and that he's not been really mistreated by the family. I mean, sure, there are things that get screwed up. They're not always perfect. He's not always perfect. But I think the sense that he has of being aggrieved, I can tell you where I think it comes from, okay? You know, sibling rivalry is very common. I don't have it in my family for some reason because I guess my sister is awesome, but neither of us ever get jealous of each other. But I see it all the time. And I would say it's probably the norm in families to have some sibling rivalry. And you have to imagine, I know Harry and William have had a great relationship supposedly up until Meghan came on the scene. I don't know if I totally buy that, okay? But you have to imagine what it is like from the moment of your birth to be designated a spare. You know that old phrase, an heir, like heir to the throne, and a spare, like basically only useful if the heir dies. And that is his designation. Now, I understand that Harry has done a number of things. He had apparently an honorable career in the military, the British Army, and he created the Invictus Games, and he's like done a lot of charity work and stuff. I'm not personally saying that I think his life is not worthwhile. What I'm saying is to be officially, from the time of your birth, from before your birth, to be designated as a spare, as secondary, as superfluous in a way, and not really having a role. This is something that, coupled with normal sibling rivalry, has got to be extremely difficult for anyone, for even the most well-adjusted person, okay? Because it's not just that Harry was designated a spare, but also, what does he have always in front of him that he's having to see? His brother, the next king. And I'm not saying that it's William's fault, but everything I've read seems to indicate that William is a great guy and will be a great king, a great representative for the country one day. I have read that he has a bit of a temper, surprisingly, because he seems like he's so laid back, but apparently when he loses it, he can really lose it. I don't mean like hitting people or abusive, but I just mean he does have a temper. But point being, where was I going with all that? And so does Harry. Where was I going with all that, though? Harry is growing up with it constantly thrown in his face. It's not subtle. Look, if you don't know much about the royal family or about royal protocol, let me just tell you that there are all of these royal protocols that govern every possible situation, basically, about, for instance, if you dine with the Queen, or if the Queen dines with you, or if Princess Margaret, before she died, if she dined with you, or what have you, or Prince Charles, you are not supposed to start eating, and more importantly, you're not supposed to stop eating. Wait, back that up. I got that wrong. You have to stop eating when the monarch stops eating. So, and this, Princess Margaret would sometimes she would mess with people about this because she could be kind of a bitch in a way, but I'm fond of her, but she could be kind of bitch in a way, and so sometimes she would mess with people, she would, hurry up and eat, and people would be maybe only a fourth of the way through their meal, and then she's finished and they have to stop, so my point being, there were all these protocols about how, people are supposed to be treated and who you bow to first. If you walk into a room and you've got different members of the royal family there, there's protocol for in what order you should bow, and so on and so forth. Okay, so my point being that this distinction between the status of Harry and the status of William, this would not be something that would be subtle, okay? This would be something that would be explicitly and probably daily or almost daily thrown in his face, not to make him angry or not to hurt him, but just as a natural result of the way that things are handled in the monarchy and in the royal household. And so if you don't think that doesn't have a significant effect on someone's psyche and a significant effect on feelings of being aggrieved and stuff, and then you add the fact that Harry did come from a broken home, and his mother his mother did die when he was young. And you add all this in the mix. And then also, the media spotlight is certainly, it's rough. It is rough. And it is something that I totally think that one should be able to walk away from the media spotlight if one wants to. Now, where I have a problem with Harry and Meghan is that they're not really walking away from the media spotlight. All right. So that's a little bit, are you in or are you out? Are you in or out? But anyway, I get to that in a moment. Now, here's my point. All right, what was my point? I did have one. Yes, is that I think what's going on, okay, is that I don't think that the royal family really from what I've read, I'm not saying that things didn't get screwed up at times or that the royal family didn't make mistakes. There weren't times when they might have mistreated Harry and Meghan, but there have been times when Harry and Meghan have mistreated other people and so forth, right? But I'm saying I don't believe that the royal family, the institution of the British monarchy, unduly targeted Harry or Meghan, or that they mistreated them really, or that that their behavior was worthy of the kind of aggrieved feelings and violated feelings. And as Meghan put it in the interview that's coming out a little bit later, that it was almost unsurvivable, I think is what she said. I don't buy all of that, but I think that what happened here, okay, I think that you have someone in Harry who has grown up feeling aggrieved and being told also that he should feel aggrieved. And I'm not saying that it's not legitimate for him to be upset or pissed off that his mom died early. I'm just saying, though, that has been a pretty constant refrain that he has seen in the media too. Ironically, the media reporting that the media killed his mom. I'm not laughing at the situation, but I'm just saying, I think that he has grown up feeling aggrieved over a number of things, but I do think primarily what's going on is we are seeing the result of someone who has been told repeatedly that he is a spare and has been designated a spare and has had to see his brother consistently favored over him. And what we know is that, Harry is the lens through which Meghan Markle sees the monarchy as well, I think. A lot of people want to blame her and say that, Harry's attitude toward the monarchy changed when she came on the scene. Maybe so, but I also think that what's going on is probably from the first time that they became close when they were dating, that I'm sure that he poured his heart out to her about how much it sucks to be in this role where you're less significant, and why is it that just because William is born earlier that this is all conferred on him. And and then you take someone like Meghan Markle, who is extremely profoundly self-assured to a degree that I think is a bit problematic, but profoundly self-assured and sure of her course, and is not gonna, and strikes me from what I've read and seen as the type of person who is not going to bend her will for anyone. One of the things that I read is that Prince Philip, who we all know is very sick now, 99 years old in the hospital, but Prince Philip, he himself, a very self-assured, confident man, right? His nickname for Meghan Markle, apparently, private nickname, is Tungsten, and tungsten is a material or a metal that has the highest melting point, which means that it can withstand higher temperatures than basically any other element or substance, okay? And so when he calls her tungsten, it's basically saying, wow, that person has a rock solid sense of self-belief and they cannot be deterred or talked out of it. Now, this could be a great thing, but it can also be problematic. And so I think what happened is you have someone who was already feeling, Harry was already feeling aggrieved. I'll stop saying that word over and over, but already feeling pissed and resentful of this situation. And then you add to that, then he falls in love with this woman who I'm sure is then reinforcing these ideas of yeah, it doesn't make any sense, especially with the American perspective, which, we don't tend to understand the idea of primogeniture, or the idea of firstborn getting the power or the concessions or whatever. So, my original question is, do they have cause for feeling aggrieved? I think that in so much as the monarchy itself, as we've talked about, can have some questionable or problematic aspects, then yes, it's totally fine for someone to say, I don't like this situation, or I don't like the way this is set up. But to act like they have been like singled out or personally attacked, or that they have had to deal with restrictions that others in their place would not have to deal with, or that other royal family members don't have to deal with, or that they were being pushed out in some way, that is not true. Prince Charles, from what I've read, was very clear with them that in his notion of a slimmed down monarchy, that they would still be a part of the core group and would have vital roles. Now, what they apparently didn't like, and I've been reading about this in Finding Freedom, what they apparently, Harry and Meghan did not like, is that they would have basically second or third dibs on speaking engagements and events. In other words, if there was some kind of an event coming up that the government or the royal family wanted to have royal representatives there for, then if the most desirable events would obviously go to, either the king or queen, or increasingly William and Kate. And so, and Charles. Forgetting Charles. I wonder why that is. So a really desirable event comes along. In general, it's going to go in that order of precedence, right? Of King, and then Charles, and then William and Kate. Now, it's not to say that Harry and Meghan have not had some really cool, interesting things that they have done. So again, I understand that it must suck, or it must be really irritating, especially if you think that you are personally more impressive than your brother. And I'm sure Meghan thinks that she's more impressive than Kate. Everybody feels that way about themselves, right? Well, not everybody. So what I'm saying is, I understand that there are things that have been irritating or galling for them in the way that the system is set up. And yet, I do not think that their complaints are as legitimate as they present them to be, or even are wholly, totally legitimate. And I'm going to have more to say about that again after I see the interview. I want to see what they say, right? I don't want to judge it before I see it. All right, number 4. Was Diana abused or mistreated by Charles and the family? So one of the things that it looks like Harry is going to refer to in this interview is the idea that Diana was alone. She was isolated by the family. She wasn't given support by the family or by her husband when she had to deal with all of this press. And then later, as the relationship with Charles deteriorated, things got even worse. And I'm going to get into this more, sorry, I sound like a broken record, but in a later video, and particularly look at the interview that she did with Martin Bashir, and also the book that she basically co-wrote, or Andrew Morton wrote, based on interviews with Diana. And then I'm going to look at other things I've read that, in a number of cases, contradict those interviews. But here's the thing. I do not like the idea, and let me just say, that while we're talking about this question, we might as well also talk about question 9 and 10, which was basically to ask what was the reason for that marriage between Charles and Diana failing? Was it mostly Charles' fault? And was Diana an innocent? Was she basically like a lamb led to the slaughter, as she claimed later that she was? All right. Let me tell you, first of all, what I believe the common perception of Diana and of that situation is. And I think it's basically the perception that Diana herself promoted a lot toward the end of her life. And then I'll tell you what based on the reading that I've done, which I think is pretty extensive, what I think. I think that the common perception is that she was a young, sweet, innocent, very, very naive person, and not only naive in the sense that she was young. She was 19 when she and Charles first got together, and I believe, I'm forgetting if she was 19 or 20 when they married. I think she was still 19. But he's getting into his 30s, right? He's in his early 30s, and she is 19. And so when they start dating and then when they marry, and so yes, of course I understand the idea of thinking that she's young, but the story goes this way, right? The story that people have is that she was all of these things, innocent, naive, and also that she was clueless about the situation that she was getting into, about what would be expected of her, about what kind of a marriage and relationship it would be, and also about the fact that she was marrying into something that was going to be very difficult. Now, and then the narrative also goes that Charles never intended to give her or to give the marriage a real shot. He had never relinquished his mistress, Camilla Parker Bowles, the woman that he's now married to, and that basically he considered the marriage to Diana just to be totally this sham that was just for show and just to say that he had married and to produce heirs, and because he was getting this pressure from his family, which he was getting pressure from his family. And so then that, basically Diana never had a chance in the marriage, and Charles treated her in a way that was extremely cold and extremely unfeeling and rude and mean and all of these other adjectives that you want to put on it. And that finally she was driven basically to such despair over all of these things, over the mistreatment of the royal family and Charles and the situation, that then she resorted to having some affairs of her own. Now, I think that narrative is really deeply flawed in a number of ways. I'm not saying there's absolutely no truth to any of it, and I'm not here to defend, despite how it may seem at certain points, I'm not here to defend Charles or to attack Diana. But, Charles has been painted, I think, unfairly, and I'm not the only one to notice this, really depicted in an unfair way in The Crown. I love The Crown. I loved the first, 3 seasons of it. But this last season, even though there were things that I liked about it, it was really disappointing the way that they chose to misrepresent some things about Charles and Diana and also about Margaret Thatcher, but I don't have time to talk about that. Here's the thing, okay? You have to understand, first of all, that the cultural context was so different if you were living in this time period in England and you were a member of the aristocratic class, this particular set of people, okay? I don't know how many people really understand what it means that Diana was a lady before she married Prince Charles. So before she was a princess, she was Lady Diana Spencer, and she was the daughter of a Viscount, which is just a really, really important, prestigious position in the nobility. So it's up there with a duke, okay? And again, we can say that these things in a modern context, that they shouldn't matter or whatever, but understand that they still confer, and especially back then in the period of time in which we're talking about, when Diana met Charles in the late 70s, it's still being an aristocrat and being something like a Viscount. It still conferred a great deal of prestige. And also, it tended to, the person who enjoyed this status would also typically be very wealthy. It wasn't always that way. Sometimes you would have people who would have titles. They would be a lord or a lady something, and yet they could actually be in deep financial trouble. But in general, and with Diana's family, there was a lot of wealth there. Her father was wealthy, and he brought this title, this peerage with him, obviously. And Diana's mother was extremely wealthy. So here's what I'm trying to say, okay, is that if you were a member of the aristocracy, like Diana was, you grew up in and you lived in a very, very different situation with what we would identify as almost alien attitudes about things. I just told you that that the upper classes at the time would send their children, basically almost all of them would send their children to boarding schools, no matter how much they love them or whatever. And I'm not attacking boarding schools here, but I'm just saying that it was like normal that you just send your kids away then you only see them like at Christmas and, some vacation time. And so there were other things that were very alien about this particular culture. But, and I'll tell you in a moment, but you cannot think that Diana grew up in some kind of, I think people almost get the sense that she grew up in some kind of middle class, what we would identify as a sort of middle class, sort of wholesome context. And I mean, I know that a number of you know that's not true, but I want you to listen to what I'm about to say, okay? And maybe you think of it differently than I do, but I think it's important. She grew up in two places. The first place, the place where Diana was born, was actually on the Queen of England's estate. The Queen of England's estate, Sandringham. So these big estates that the royal family owns, or well, I don't know who owns them technically. I guess the Queen does. I don't know so much about the financial stuff. Sorry. But anyway, these big estates that they own, like Sandringham and Balmoral and Windsor and stuff like that, they will often allow people, especially like people with a long noble background, family background or historical background, they'll allow people to, like to pay to live on the land and even build a house. And so Princess Diana's mother, whose last name was Fermoy, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but Princess Diana's mother came from this hugely wealthy and prestigious family. And so from her, they inherited, or they had this house, and it was on Sandringham. It was on the Queen's property. So what is the point? My point is that Diana was born and was raised for the first years of her life on the Queen's property. And you say, well, what's the point of that? I'll get to that in a minute. But she was born and raised on the Queen's property, and in fact was interacting with the Queen's children, particularly Andrew, when they were really young, but also, would see a couple of occasions saw Charles. Now, then what happened is Diana's father eventually, when Diana had grown up just a little bit, but was still a young woman, Diana's father, a young woman, like still a child, Diana's father inherited the earldom. His father died, and he became the official Viscount, and he was referred to as Earl Spencer, as the firstborn son, primogeniture. He got all the marbles, so to speak. And he inherits, Diana's father, he inherits Althorp. And Althorp, I don't have a lot of pictures, very many pictures in this, because I'm really pressed for time to get this out. But I hope I can put up a picture of Althorp, and if I forget to, pause it and look it up, okay? Because it is worth looking at. Althorp, Diana's home, okay? She spent most of her childhood then and teen years in this home. Now, I have to ask you, please look it up again if you haven't, okay? And then come back, because I'm going to say something about it. All right, so I'm serious, and hopefully I'll just put a picture up. But it's not beyond me to forget to do these things when I'm pressed for time. Okay, I hope you looked it up. So this is not the home of someone from any backgrounds that I've ever recognized. I mean, what I'm trying to say is this is very much, maybe not to all of you. God bless you if this is your house. But my point is, this is something different than I think a number of people picture Diana and her upbringing. Very, very high. I mean, she upper class, and sort of in the stratosphere and of the social milieu in this way in England, Great Britain. And also she lived Althorp. People had remarked before, who had been to the Queen's residences and had been to Althorp, that Althorp was better, that Althorp was actually better than any of the castles or palaces or whatever that the royal family was able to enjoy. So, this was a big deal. And they could trace the Spencers. Diana's father's name was Spencer, Earl Spencer, and they could trace their lineage back hundreds of years to they could trace their lineage back beyond the Windsors. Their family was actually more prestigious and had a more prestigious lineage and had been really important in the country for hundreds of years, even before Queen Elizabeth's family. Okay? So understand that. Now, also, you have to understand, and again, I'll tell you where I'm going with this in a second. I think maybe some of you are getting it. Also, you have to understand that at the time, in this social context, a, quote, marriage of convenience was not the bad thing that we tend to see it as today. I have a really huge newsflash for you. Okay, so protect yourselves, get ready. that newsflash is that attitudes are very different today in 2021 than they were in 1979. Shocking, I know, but it's true, okay? Sorry, I don't know. I'm probably being annoying right now. Sometimes the only way, like these videos, they are kind of tiring, no offense, and so sometimes the only way to get through them is like if I can like take breaks and just kind of laugh at what I'm talking about. Otherwise it's just like a little bit too difficult just to charge through it, especially since I don't use notes. Okay, so and you're like, yes, I can tell you're always getting off track. Okay, so my point being that attitudes were different, and one of the ways in which they were different is that it was not seen if you married someone for their money or for their status, especially if you were a woman, like, and that was your motivation, like that was okay. And of course we know that lots of people, or a number of people, still do that today, and I'm not making any judgments about that. I'd love to talk about that sometime because I'm not sure that there's actually something wrong with that. Y'all don't hate me, but I don't know, it's not my situation. But my point being that, you know, the idea that Charles and Diana married because Charles needed to have a suitable wife, and because Charles needed an heir, and also because the throne of England would one day need a certain kind of woman as queen, these were not, there was nothing wrong with this way of thinking, okay? Like I'm saying that especially for back then, if Charles was marrying Diana and did not love her, but was marrying her anyway for the reasons that I just mentioned, I don't think that back then that was considered to be immoral or unethical or whatever. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. If in my British listeners, if you were in this social milieu at the time, you know, I would love to hear about it. I'd love to talk to you about it, man. I wonder if there's anyone out there who fits that description. But if you were like upper class, aristocratic, British in the late 70s in some of these circles. Anyway, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this was the attitude that I've read about and that I've picked up on. So, you know, I guess what I'm saying is that, well, and here's one more thing to keep in mind too. I know that you've heard before that Diana came from a broken marriage. All right, that her mother left the family when Diana was fairly young. I don't remember the age, maybe 6. Left the family, and that it scarred Diana. And all of those things are true. This was probably, and I have a lot of sympathy for Diana, and hopefully that will come across more as I talk about her, because I know, you know, it's easy. I'm sorry. I guess what I'm saying is, to a degree, I want to correct some of these misrepresentations of Charles, but I also have a lot of sympathy for her. And what I really think is that you have two deeply flawed people who got into a bad marriage and were unable to get out of it when normal people would have been able to. That's really my analysis of it. I think, and I'm going to continue talking about what I was talking about in a second, but I do think that was basically what happened. I think Charles is in a number of ways, very weak, and I think that his issues, or the way that he treated Diana, it tended to be sins of weakness or sins of omission rather than sins of commission. And you could say, well, he had an affair, you know, or loved Camilla. Okay, but what I was trying to tell you in this earlier, I was trying to tell you that we can look back at Charles marrying a woman for these reasons that don't have anything to do with love. And we can say from our vantage point that that was immoral or unethical. But what I'm trying to say to you is I don't believe at the time it would have been considered the way we think of it now. And also that I think Diana I think that she herself was basically following similar ways of thinking, because there was nothing for her to logically be in love with about Charles if she was truly looking for someone who was like her. They were extremely, extremely different, and I want to talk about that in one of these videos that I'm working on right now, but they were like night and day. Charles was extremely into like really bookish, like esoteric, like philosophy, and his favorite writer is this guy named Lawrence Vanderpost. I hope I'm getting that right. He's dead now, but he was into all this. He would write this kind of like mystical, deeply philosophical travel literature, and it was all like into nature and stuff. And I haven't read it, so I'm not judging it, okay? But I'm just saying, and Charles liked to talk about Ruskin, and he liked to talk about Carl Jung, and he was always reading. That's the thing one of the things that really comes across to me in a very strong way from what I've read from a number of people saying, is that Charles is extremely bookish, and that, in a positive way, it means that he actually knows a lot about a lot and is intellectually curious, but in a negative way, it means that he's not the most emotionally intuitive person, almost kind of, well, I don't want to go on that track and start trying to, diagnose people for cognitive issues, or what is it, a neurotypicality, okay? But my point being is that you had someone like him, and he was older than his years. Everyone talked about how he loved to hang out with older male mentors like Lord Mountbatten and Vanderpost and some of these people who were way older. And so, he was already older than Diana by a pretty significant amount. He's a grown man, and he is marrying a teenager. And then when you think about all of these things, it really compounded it. Now, here's the thing, though. Diana was very, very, and I don't think this should really come as a surprise to anyone because she was so good with people. But Diana was a highly manipulative person. And I don't want to speak ill of the dead. And I know, I was even hesitant to make this video because I knew I would have to talk about this. And I'm really not out to prove that Diana was really not the cool person everybody thinks that she was. And that's not what I'm trying to prove, nor do I think I even really do that. But she had an exceptional heart. I don't think anybody even would try to deny that. She had, and that comes through very clearly, that when she was at her purest in the sense of who she was really shining through and governing her behavior. And so those moments when she would connect with people, I totally think those moments were real. All of that. I think it was really a gift. But unfortunately, and I could go on and say more about all the wonderful things. I feel like you know those things, right? But look it up yourself. Totally legit, I think. But the problem is she was deeply, deeply scarred by early experiences and with growing up and her mom leaving and being raised in a weird aristocratic way and a distant father and just kind of all kinds of unhealthy dynamics going on in her house. And I think she was deeply scarred, and so it had turned her into, again, I don't like diagnosing people, and so I'm not from afar unless I feel pretty sure about it, and I don't at all. But I just think that she was we can say that she was deeply scarred, and that she had a number of big issues. One of them being she was a highly manipulative personality, and I'm not talking about diabolical, what's going on with the Johnny Depp situation that I talk about in my other videos. Okay, I'm just saying she was just really manipulative. She had that wonderful, beautiful heart, but there was a lot of stuff that got in the way at times of her really expressing that or connecting with that as she could have. And so she was highly manipulative. There are so many things that she said to Andrew Morton in the biography that he wrote about her when she sat down for the interview, we know now, and he wrote the biography based on that. There were so many things that she flat out lied about. And, I'll go through in one of my next videos. I'm not going to go through a lot of them because I just don't think it's pleasant or helpful past a certain point, but I will give you some examples and you can see. And again, what am I saying? I'm not saying she was a pathological liar or anything like that. I think most of the time, again, when who she was really radiating and shining through and was not obstructed or obscured by a lot of this other crap. Okay. But unfortunately that happened a lot. And here's what I'm getting at is that based on what I have read, Diana did go to great lengths to present herself to the royal family and to Charles as being something very, very different than what she was. And the change that occurred, the change that Charles experienced, and Diana even admits to this at times in her own way. I don't know, really like completely knowingly, but she does. The change that occurred between their courtship, it was short, but their courtship, and then right after marriage, like the person that she was or that she was presenting, or maybe that she was feeling, I don't know, but that person radically changed. Now, I understand you say, well, yeah, because she thought that he was going to give up Camilla, and then she realized that he wasn't, and so forth. It's just very complicated, and here's where I kind of want to circle back to something that I brought up 5 or 10 minutes ago. She was raised by and large, and it was indoctrinated and instilled in Diana from her grandmother, in particular, who Lady Ruth Fermoy was a really, really strong figure in Diana's life, and also she was the best friends with the Queen Mother. So Diana, what I'm saying is Diana's grandmother was best friends with the mother of Queen Elizabeth II, also known as the Queen Mother. And that's actually how the relationship between Diana and Charles came to be, as a number of you know. And so what I'm saying is that, and Diana had seen an example in her own parents' life of this marriage of convenience, because Diana's mother had originally married basically because Diana's father was the most eligible or like highest ranking socially guy at the time, and that it was largely a marriage of convenience, and then she ended up regretting it and leaving him, walking out on him, and marrying someone else, which divorce had such a tremendous stigma back then that if you did get a divorce, if you left your spouse, like, you must really want to, right? Anyway, my point is that Diana had seen this marriage of convenience in her own parents, and also, wait, hold on. All right, so I had to go get something to drink for a second. So Diana had that example in front of her of this marriage of convenience between her parents. It was something that was more or less going on, pretty much all the time, of parents in the aristocracy. Just a number of stories that I've read, all these stories of these parents, during the debutante seasons especially, but just like basically sort of manipulating like puppet masters, especially the mothers, the women, manipulating like puppet masters, like these matchups and these pairings between these kind of clueless like teenagers. Anyway, so there's this whole sort of tradition of marrying for convenience. I'm not saying that marrying for love was not viewed as important by a number of people, or the idea that, yes, of course you want to love to some degree the person that you're marrying, but it's just alien attitudes from today, okay? This was not, it was just different. And so my point is, so Diana had these examples in front of her. And here's the thing, she apparently from an early age, and I'm not saying there's anything sinister about this, but she apparently from a pretty young age had been adamant with people that she wanted to be the Princess of Wales, that she really, she did have as a legitimate goal that she wanted to be Princess of Wales one day. And she had such aspirations to greatness, and she would tell people around her that she was destined, or she had this way of presenting this idea that she was destined for something greater, that her nickname actually, before she even started dating Prince Charles, okay, before any of that, but her nickname was Dutch, as in Duchess, as in like someone who, it was her friend's way of, in a sort of a nice, like sweet but funny way of pointing out that she had these aspirations to be something grand. And so it's like, oh yes, she's the Grand Duchess. And again, I'm not saying that's sinister, but and so before Diana started dating Charles, Diana's sister dated Charles for a while. They were apparently, supposedly never intimate, but they dated for a period of time until Diana's sister, this is her older sister, she ended up blowing it by getting kind of drunk, I think, and talking to some reporters, or she talked to some reporters that was supposed to be off the record. They put it on the record, and anyway, I guess Charles didn't really like her that much anyway. Different personality to Diana. And so anyway, Diana had met Charles, as a number of you know, she had met Charles when she was 16. and when he was dating their sister casually, but and had been sort of in the social milieu, as it's called. But before she started dating him, before they had really had a meaningful interaction, some of her friends, have talked about, good naturedly, but have talked about how she really made a point of saying, like, do you, I want this to happen. Do you think this can happen? And one guy talks about how, one friend of hers talks about how, and this is all like sometimes after she was dead, right? Yeah. But her friends talking about these things. But he said that they got in the car one night, was driving around, and she wanted him to. She made him, but she wanted him to drive around Buckingham Palace several times. And she was looking at it, and she said to him, what do you think? Do you think I have a chance? And again, nothing wrong with and nothing sinister about being an upper class British girl and dreaming of being the Queen of England one day or marrying Prince Charming. And I hesitate to even say something like that, because I'm not trying to say that I'm not at all trying to say that she had, that I feel like she had like this whole agenda that she was just like, diabolical about or anything like that. But what I do think that she has to take some responsibility, or we have to have her take some responsibility when we think about this stuff, for the fact that she did have she had a goal. She had something that she really wanted to happen. And I don't think that I think that she's gone back and rewritten that in the subsequent interviews that she did, she went back and rewrote history a bit, as if she was this naive innocent and didn't realize what she was getting into. And I guess what I'm trying to say to you is, I do think that she realized what she was getting into to a greater degree than we think, or that she's been given credit for. And I think that, or she wouldn't have been before the wedding, asking someone close to her if she should call it off or not, right? And I think that she would not have fallen in love with Charles, who, they shared, he loved the outdoors, and she hated the outdoors. He loved hunting. She hated hunting. He loved fishing. He could spend all afternoon just fly fishing or whatever. And she hated all of this stuff. He loved the country. He loved being out in the country. He loved taking walks in mud and fresh air, as all of the family, the Windsors, do. She hated it. And she was, she was a city girl, and she was into that kind of stuff. And those of you who know her bio know the kind of things I'm talking about. But here's the thing, is that she knew who he was. She did know who he was by the time that, very, very quickly into things, right? I think so. And she, on the other hand, was very much hiding, and not just hiding, but she was distorting who she was. I don't have time to really get into it, but I'll give you one example, is that she was invited to a weekend where the royal family would be and where Charles would be. And this was when, basically, at this point, the royal family had taken notice of her. The Queen Mother, who, remember, was friends with Diana's grandmother, had taken notice of her, and Diana's grandmother was really kind of pushing this idea too. Charles needs to date my granddaughter. So anyway, she and people around her start noticing that she has a distinctive look. I know she's not beautiful to everybody's taste. Sometimes I actually think Diana's kind of a little strange looking, but she definitely has this very distinctive look. You can see why their eyes drawn to her. And so people started noticing her, and this is when she was, in her late teens. And so what happened was, where was I going with that? Oh, so she's invited to this weekend retreat, and it's very outdoorsy, okay? And the family's going to be there, Windsor's there, and then other friends and people, right? She's invited to this retreat, and she goes out of her way. By multiple accounts, there are all kinds of people who are at the retreat, and even people who are, close friends with her, and so on and so forth, who talk about this stuff. Because, again, it's after the fact, many years after someone's died, more people are willing to go on the record, just for the sake of, history, of just remembering things correctly, I guess. And they talk about, everybody kind of agrees that she went out of her way, Diana went out of her way to present herself as being the ultimate, or this hardcore outdoors woman, that she loved the outdoors, she loved hunting, Prince Charles took her fishing. And, you know, this book that I was reading talks about how most of Prince Charles' girlfriends had really hated having to hang around while he would spend hours fishing. Like, it was really unpleasant for them, which I don't doubt that it wasn't much fun. And Diana, so they were really like bored or not into it or whatever, but Diana on this weekend, and while they were courting, whenever something like this would happen, like fishing or outdoors or hunting, she would act like she was really into it. And apparently, like, she did this, you know, he was fishing and she was asking him all these questions about like how exactly everything goes, and she would make comments to the Windsors about how she was, you know, a country, or make comments to everyone there, including the Windsors, about how she was a country girl at heart. And they assumed, because she had grown up on this big estate, and had even at one point grown up on the Queen's estate, as I said, that they assumed that she must be like them. And she was not doing anything to dispel the notion. She was, in fact, in every way she could, she was emphasizing it. And one of the Queen's aides at the time, he ended up being a really important person in the household, but he was like her personal assistant, private secretary for a while, Martin Charteris. And Charteris talked about basically attested to the fact that Diana had played things perfectly. And he didn't mean it in a negative way, but he's like, I just remember thinking like, wow, you were really doing a good job with the image you're presenting here to the Windsors. And he talks about how at one point Diana fell into the mud and got really, really dirty, and that she stands up and she's like almost kind of hysterically laughing, but not in a weird way, but just like, oh, isn't this funny? Oh, I'm having so much fun. And again, what's the point of what I'm saying? And also, you know, she acted like she was really interested when she and Charles were courting. She acted like she was really interested in all of the like esoteric philosophers that he was interested in, and reading and stuff like that. Even though at the same time she would admit that she hadn't even had her O levels, which I think means that she had not even maybe. You'll have to tell me, European people, but she hadn't graduated from high school, maybe? Is that what I'm to understand? She was completely uneducated, and in my longer video, I talk about that, get more into her background. But that was a big problem in her relationship with Charles, is that they had like no intellectual foundation, and they also had no emotional foundation, really, because they were such alien species to each other emotionally. Like, as I said, Charles probably not the best at relating to people at times, and I think he has a good heart. I really don't. Someone asked me, do I think Charles is a narcissist? And I don't. And I also don't think Diana is a narcissist, by the way, either. And so my point being, I just think we have two deeply flawed people, but they were flawed too in ways that didn't complement each other well. And so Diana was this really intellectually immature, but deeply emotionally capable or emotionally connective person. So, uh-oh, my power's low. I'm gonna have to wrap this soon. Yeah, I didn't get through all my questions, but you know what that means? It just means I have to do another video. So anyway, point being, Diana was this like deeply emotionally connective person, deeply emotionally intuitive, so good at like sizing people up and connecting with them and everything. But Charles, unfortunately, she was married to someone who was very sort of, his emotional matrix seemed to be kind of alien in a way, and who was definitely like not. He didn't find the real her and her emotionality and stuff particularly endearing as everybody else did. They just had bad chemistry. You know, it's interesting. Charles said in a letter that he wrote to someone there's nothing like salacious about the letter, but one of the letters that was discussed in one of these books I read, there's a quote from Charles to a friend, and he's bemoaning. He says basically, what a curse it is to be incompatible. Incompatibility is just, it is such torture. And you can, and so he's talking about the fact that it's not that there's something particularly, like he's even blaming Diana, and although I know he did in a number of occasions, but you could really get the sense of just like frustration, and someone who wants things to work but doesn't know how to make them work. And also, of course, he's not helping things by having this other woman in the picture that he's still in love with. It one of the big questions that comes out is, was Charles having an affair with Diana the whole time? Or, I'm sorry, an affair with Camilla the whole time or not? Was there a period, as he claims, early in his marriage where he was faithful and tried to be faithful to her? I'm still looking at that. And so I don't want to give an answer because I'm just not sure what I think. That's a big question mark for me. You know, if I had to answer that question, I would say I do get the sense from a lot of statements from friends and the different sources that I've read, I do get the sense that Charles really believed that he had some genuine feelings for her at one point, that when they were courting, Charles, when he was courting her, that he had determined that he would move forward and try to be a good husband and try to make it work. And and you know, like I said, she had presented herself in a way that was really different, and so he thought he was marrying a woman that he was more compatible with. And then what happened was, it basically, you know, and I understand partly because she was so upset about finding out that he was still in communication with Camilla, okay, and I talk about that more, but she was very, very different than what she depicted herself as being. And I know that when we're young, we put on masks and stuff. I'm not saying that this is something that, you know, yes, she was young, she was 19, and Charles should have understood. Everybody should have understood that when you are marrying a 19-year-old, I'm not talking about whether there's something wrong with it or not, because I think it's of age, and I think in most societies throughout history that's been considered well into adulthood. But what I'm saying is, you do have to understand that, especially in, you know, in modern culture, when you're marrying a 19-year-old, you're marrying someone whose identity is like still totally basically unformed. And so they thought that what they were getting, the royal family thought that what they were getting was a known quantity. Based on what they saw with Diana, they thought that she understood kind of the rules of the game in terms of aristocratic attitudes, and maybe, you know, the idea of, I think, to a degree, marriage for convenience, or you marry and then hopefully you grow together or whatever, maybe even allowing for a mistress. I mean, I'm just saying that these were a lot of common attitudes from what I've read. They thought they were getting someone who understood the rules. They thought they were getting someone who, how do I put this? They thought they were getting someone who was extremely sweet and docile and submissive, because that is what she presented herself to be. And they thought that they were getting someone who was very emotionally stable. And I have to say that, and Diana, based on even what she says about herself in her own interviews and in that book, the Morton book, she was extremely, extremely, extremely emotionally unstable, to the point where, yes, I do think you could consider her emotionally abusive to Charles and also to her sons at times. I'm not saying that she was mean, or that she, you know, or that she was all the time going into rages or anything else. And I hesitate to even, you know, say something like that, because maybe I'm overstating it a bit. You know, so I did even read some stuff that indicated maybe some physical abuse of Charles, like her hitting him at times, but I did not, that ended up not being confirmable for me. And so I feel like what it's safe to say is that Diana was someone said online, a deeply troubled person. That's right, a deeply troubled person. Who should not have been marrying probably at this point in her life, and certainly not into the kind of like serious, high stress, strange kind of alien situation that she was marrying into. But because of her own background and the way she presented herself, it was understood that Charles and his family, they thought that's what they were getting. And so I guess, you know, I want to wrap this up because I you know, the interview with Oprah is about to start now. But I guess what I'm saying to you is that, and we still have a number of questions I know we didn't get to, and maybe I'll go faster next time. Sorry if I've rambled. All right. This was, like I said, it was something I didn't have a lot of time to prepare for, and so I really wanted to get it out and be timely. And that's why there's not like a lot of pictures and stuff like I normally do, is because I literally just have not had time to put something more together and still be timely and able to get this out tonight for this interview. So anyway, that's just my explanation. If you want to see what my videos are normally like, take a look at one of the other ones. So I guess my point is that Meghan Markle for me is still a question mark. I do have some issues at this point. I do have some issues with her attitude, or with and Harry's attitude, and some of the things that they've said, and some of the basically the suggestions that they seem to have made that they suffered some kind of really horrible mistreatment or targeting. And we didn't get into the race issue this time. I'm sorry, but I will talk about that. Plan to talk about that in the next video. Someone sent me some examples and stuff on Twitter, and I am taking that seriously to take a look at it. But I guess still a question mark for me, although I do have a somewhat negative perception, but I'm open, and I'm going to finish Finding Freedom. I'm just going to skim it really fast and look at some of this other stuff and come back with an opinion. And then as far as the Diana question, I do hope that, and the nature of the Windsors and the royal family, I do hope that you have now maybe a bit more clarity about the situation and something a little more complete than maybe what you knew or what you thought you knew. Okay. All right. So on that eloquent, on that final ending, that final eloquent note there. So if you want to watch my future videos on this topic, I am trying now to reward my PayPal tippers and my Patreon donors, or whatever, supporters, whatever you want to call it, with some exclusive content. But I never want to limit something so that the general audience can't see it eventually. And so what I'm going to start doing with some of my videos, not with all of them, but with some of them, especially, so right now with these royal family videos, is I'm making the first one available to everyone, but then you have to make a small donation, just $1, on PayPal or Patreon. Now on PayPal, you don't have to have an account. You can, in order to make a tip or a donation. All right. But for $1, you can see the rest of the videos in this series. So I'm going to have a response after the Oprah interview with Meghan Markle and Harry, and I'm going to try to have that out pretty fast tonight. Okay, so it's still very relevant. And then I'm also I'm working on right now a couple of videos about the history of the royal family, where I'm going to get into a lot more about the stuff that I just touched on here. And there's so many other things that are so interesting that I was not able to get into. I mean, Princess Margaret's life, if not, that in itself is fascinating. And then also talk a lot more about Diana and that larger situation, and her death, and then finally give you more of a sense of how I think that fits in then with what's going on with the current royal family and with this dynamic that we've seen emerge with William and with Harry and Meghan. All right, so anyway, yes, so all that is to say that if you donate $1 or tip $1, then you will get all of that content. And then if you don't, you just have to hold on for 2 weeks, okay? Because 2 weeks after, I will make it available to everybody. So it's really, I'm not trying to exclude anybody, hurt anybody's feelings, because, I myself rarely donate to YouTubers, but it is appreciated. And I do feel now, being on this side of things, how much it really is appreciated when people can give something, even just, and so yeah, and I am going to go back to my usual videos as well. All right, so that's my long rambling explanation. Please subscribe to my channel, and like I said, if you want more videos in this royal family series, they're coming up. You just have to donate a little bit. Check back with me tonight, and I'll be talking about the interview. All right, bye-bye.